alternates all have returned. Mr. Durst is present, Mr. Chesnoff, Mr. Miata is at council table. He's assisted by Mr. Bailey and Mr. Lewin. And Mr. Miata, are we now resuming the videotape conditional examination testimony of Stewart Altman?
Yes, Your Honor, and that's People's 174 is the flash drive that contains that video testimony. We're going to go ahead and resume where we left off, which is going to be 1 hour, 10 minutes, and 21 seconds into the video. And just for reference, where we are in the transcript, we're about 96 pages in. And if you look, it's about a quarter of the way in. It's actually marked as page 24 on the upper right-hand corner. It's the page on the left-hand side. And we're going to resume right about line 9 of that section.
Okay. And how much remains? Do you know how much time remains on this?
Do you really want to know?
Well, just break them gently.
2 hours and 50 minutes.
All right.
That collective parole. That's great.
He doesn't look tired. He looks ready to go.
May I resume?
You may, Mr. Miata.
Thank you.
And can you tell me how many times you think you saw Bob and Kathy Durst together?
I cannot give you a quantitative number. I can tell you numbers.
No, not a trick question, Mr. Altman. I'm not looking for you. We spent 43 times together. I'm going, did you have the opportunity to see Bob and Kathy Durst together on numerous occasions?
Many.
And can you describe when the first time you think it was you saw them together? And that might be just in reference to, when they met, when they were married. I don't know. When is the first time you can remember that you saw them together? Can you tell me, how did you meet Kathy?
She lives in the building where I live.
And this predates Emily, is that right? Not predates Emily as a person, predates your involvement with Emily.
I believe so.
I think you get yourself in trouble if you don't know when you met your wife. Did you know your wife in 71?
Yes.
When did you and your wife get married?
73.
So when did you start dating?
I believe it was about 71. I really don't know the date.
Can you describe what you saw? Tell me when you were at.
The moment they met, they seemed to get along well.
Would you describe it as a loving relationship based on your observations?
Yes.
Did you and Emily, once you started dating her, did the two of you guys spend time with Bob and Kathy together socially?
Yes.
And would that have been numerous occasions?
Yes.
And would that have involved spending a fair amount of time together on those occasions?
Yes.
Did Bob communicate to you how he felt about Kathy at this time?
He loved Kathy.
In the times that you saw them interacting together, did you ever see any physical violence on the part of Bob Durst towards Kathy?
No.
Did you ever see any arguing between Bob and Kathy?
No.
Based on your observations of the relationship at that time, is it fair to say that Bob was the more dominant one?
Yes.
And Kathy was much younger, right?
She was younger.
Fair to say she was approximately 10 years younger than Bob? Same.
Yes,
And when you met Kathy, to the best of your memory, she was around 20 or a little less than 20, is that right?
yes, so.
And is it fair to say that, based on your observations, that kind of Bob, he was running the boat. Do you understand that term?
He was the more dominant.
Did you have personal knowledge back at the time Kathy was alive that Bob was unfaithful to her?
During the time period?
So I'm sorry, prior to Kathy Durst disappearing, did you have knowledge that Bob Durst was unfaithful to her?
Yes.
And when I say the name Prudence Farrell, are you familiar with who that is?
Yes.
Who's Prudence Farrell?
She's the woman who Bob met.
And can you tell me what you know about Prudence Farrell? And I'm not asking what you've read about. I'm asking what you know about through your own personal knowledge and observation.
Nothing. I never met her.
Okay, we'll adjourn that. So, okay, we'll resume at 1:30. We'll return and not discuss your testimony with any other witness or representative. Witness Stewart Altman is resuming a witness stand. He has counsel as well. Mr. McClain is Bednarski. Mr. Altman, you remain under oath.
Mr. Altman, when did you hear that Susan Berman had been murdered?
Read the papers. I was sure that they...
And is that your first knowledge of her killing was through the newspaper?
Yes.
Did your wife tell you in December of 2000 that she was aware that Susan Berman had been murdered?
I can't recall.
Well, if your wife had told you about it before you read about it in the newspapers, that's something you think you remember.
I don't recall.
So would it be fair that the testimony would be that you might have heard that Susan Berman had been murdered from reading about it in the paper, or you might have heard about it from your wife? You're not sure. Is that fair?
I'm pretty sure I read about it.
Okay. Is your testimony then that you might have had a discussion with your wife about Susan Berman's murder in December of 2000, but you're just not sure? Or is it your testimony that no, we didn't have such a discussion?
Well, after I read about it, I wouldn't have told you. After I read it, we would have discussed that.
And I'm just trying to clarify, and again, best your memory, it would have been read about it first, then discuss it with your wife.
Correct.
And whenever it was you found out about it, you then discussed it with your wife. Is that correct?
We talked about it.
Do you remember having a conversation in New Orleans jail with Bob Durst on June 12, 2015 at 7:04 p.m.?
Was I in the jail?
No, did you have a conversation by phone with Bob Durst?
I'm not sure of the date, but I've had conversations with Mr. Durst on the telephone.
Have you had a chance, Mr. Altman, to review either recordings and or transcripts or notes or reports of the phone conversations you had with Bob Durst while he was incarcerated in Louisiana?
I didn't read any transcripts, no.
Have you yourself listened to recordings of any of your phone conversations with Mr. Durst while he was in Louisiana jail?
No.
So I'm asking you, did you discuss or listen to or hear the contents of your phone conversations with your lawyer?
My lawyer. Yes.
Your lawyer is
With my lawyer, I did.
Did you listen to, discuss the contents of the phone conversations with any lawyers?
I just said I discussed it with my lawyer.
With your lawyer. Does that mean then, so you're familiar with then, the contents of those conversations from jail, correct?
Not every conversation, not every line. I only discussed certain things with my lawyer, and those are the things I can
Okay.
tell you about.
Were you made aware, either through something you listened to, something you read, or something you were told of a conversation you had with Bob Durst on December 15th, June 12, 2015, while he was in Louisiana jail at 7:04 p.m. Is that a call by date and time you remember?
Okay, were you made aware of the content of the conversation that you had?
I don't know which one Mr. Lewis is talking about, but I was made aware of some of the conversations.
Were you aware, Mr. Altman, of a conversation that took place on June 12, 2015, where Bob Durst told you that he did not want to, quote, take a position, unquote, about whether he was in Los Angeles at the time Susan Berman was murdered?
I don't really know what's going on about that.
Your answer a second ago was to the effect of, you think there was something about a call like that, but you weren't definitive, yes, I'm aware of that call, is that correct?
Exactly.
So my question is, Mr. Altman, you're telling me that as you sit here right now, you don't have a clear memory of exactly the call I'm referring to. Is that what your testimony is?
There were a lot of telephone calls. There was a lot of meetings. It's difficult for me to square it down. I did tell you that I'm familiar with that.
Well, in fact, when you say you're familiar with it, Mr. Altman, isn't it true that you are well aware that there is a call that you had with Mr. Durst on June 12, 2015, where Bob Durst tells you that he is not going to take a position about being in Los Angeles at the time of Susan's murder, correct?
Correct?
Isn't it true that as soon as I asked you that question, you knew exactly the call I was referring to?
No, Mr. Lewis. I don't know. There's any phone calls. I don't have them in front of me. I don't have an index. I'm sorry. I cannot tell you that.
Call SA006, 6, People's 41 and 41A, 6/12/2015, 7:04 p.m.
Yeah, I saw it yesterday, and we went over a whole bunch of stuff. The main one was talk about where I was, when and how, and everything. In Los Angeles, and I've been putting it off and putting it off. Just as I'm uncertain and uncomfortable trying to take a position, since I keep remembering things differently, sort of. So I've never spoken to him at all about where I was, etc. in Los Angeles.
Right. You know, it's like 14 years ago, for God's sake.
Mr. Altman, do you recall this conversation?
You refresh my recollection. Yes.
And is it your testimony that you did not remember this specific conversation with Mr. Durst until I just played it for you right now?
No.
So you did remember it, correct?
I spoke with my attorneys.
About this particular conversation, correct?
I believe so.
In that call, Mr. Altman, when's the last time you heard or discussed that call?
I never heard the call.
When's the last time you discussed the call?
When I met with my attorneys.
When was that?
I can't tell you what day.
Was it going to be when you came out this trip? Was it prior to this trip?
No, that's fine. It was this week.
And did they actually show or read to you a transcript?
They didn't show me a transcript. They read to me.
Is this the only phone call that you were read or discussed with your lawyer?
No.
How many other phone calls?
Oh, I don't know the number.
It was a very small amount, is that correct?
Yes.
did you go over all the phone calls that we discussed, or that you are aware of, listened to, or read, etc.? Were they before December 14, 2015, or did you discuss or were you made aware of phone calls with Mr. Durst that took place after September 14, 2015?
I really don't remember the dates.
Other than through any attorney-client representation, are you aware that Mr. Durst had flown out to California right before Susan Berman was murdered?
I read it. I saw it on television.
And that's your only source for that? Again, other than any attorney-client information?
Right.
Other than any attorney-client information, are you aware that Mr. Durst has maintained that he was not in Los Angeles at the time that Susan Berman was murdered?
I don't understand.
Other than any attorney-client conversation you had with Mr. Durst, are you aware that Mr. Durst has maintained that he was not in Los Angeles at the time of Susan Berman's murder?
I think it's public knowledge that he stated he wasn't in Boston.
Have you had a chance, Mr. Altman, have you listened, watched, read, reviewed the interview that I did with Mr. Durst when he was in Louisiana jail?
I did listen to it.
I'm sorry?
I did.
And I assume you watched that interview, listened to it pretty carefully, correct?
Not really.
And how many times have you listened to it or reviewed it?
Once.
Once. During that interview, are you aware that Mr. Durst said that he was not in Los Angeles at the time of Susan Berman's murder?
I'll take your word for it, sorry.
You don't remember that at this time?
It was a long interview and I only listened to it once.
Have you ever discussed your testimony coming to court and the subject of your testimony? I'm not asking what you said, but have you discussed that with any of Mr. Durst's attorneys?
No.
When's the last time you had any contact by phone, by email, personal contact with any of Mr. Durst's attorneys?
I really can't remember. It's a long time ago.
They are paying, Mr. Durst is paying for your lawyers, correct?
Yes.
Did you work that out with conversations with Mr. Durst's attorneys?
I did make a phone call about that.
When was that?
That service was subpoenaed.
And did they pay for your attorneys in New York as well?
Yes.
And was that at your request?
Yes.
Do you have any idea how much money they have spent?
I don't know.
You have no idea.
No.
You don't look over the bills. Do the bills come to you, or do they come directly to Mr. Durst's attorneys?
All the New York attorneys, I can't tell you what it was. I don't remember what it was. I can't tell you. But I haven't seen any other bills.
Is it your understanding, Mr. Altman, that we are talking an amount that is greater likely than $50,000 in total?
I guess.
What's,
Yes.
I'm asking you to give an educated guess as a lawyer who is employing other lawyers to represent him. Would you agree, is that approximately or at least $50,000 between New York and LA? Does that sound accurate?
Possibly.
That's the most you can say is possible?
Did a lot of work.
Okay.
When I say the term cadaver, do you know what I'm referring to?
Yes.
When did you first become aware of the cadaver?
I believe that I found out about the note through public knowledge, newspapers or news reports, something like that.
I want you to assume for a moment that it first appeared in print about a year ago in 2002. Do you believe you knew about it before or after that time?
I found out about it in the public domain. I don't.
Is your memory that you read about it in an article or on the newspaper?
I did. I read about it somewhere. Or I've seen it on television.
Are you familiar with Bob Durst's writing?
I've seen writing from Bob.
And you've seen writing from Bob separate from your representation, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I want to show you what's been previously marked. 25. People's 25. Got a little computer. There we go. Okay. Do you see that?
Yes.
Can you tell me, does that appear to you to be Bob Durst's writing?
It's possible.
Well, does that look to you like Bob Durst's writing?
It's possible.
Does it look like your writing?
I didn't write that.
So, when you say it's possible, is there anybody's writing that you know, other than Bob Durst, that writing looks like?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm going to take it one step at a time. Do you agree, Mr. Altman, that looks like Bob Durst's writing?
I said it's possible.
That's not. Remember, would you ask the witness to answer the question?
We've said it is possible that it is Bob Durst's writing. So the common understanding of possible is everything is possible. Anything is possible. So he's asking whether this resembles, you said you're familiar with his writing. The question is whether you believe it is, to you, does it appear similar to Bob Durst's writing? Do you understand the question? That's a little different. That's so,
Similar?
yes.
Similar. I don't know that person, no.
Now, you said you saw the Jinx, correct?
Yes.
Did you see the episode where Bob Durst was shown this note, this writing? Did you see
Yes.
it? Do you agree that Mr. Durst said that it looked like his writing?
Yes.
You and Mr. Durst corresponded while he was in custody, both in Pennsylvania and Louisiana, is that correct?
What kind of correspondence? Writing?
Right, written correspondence, I'm sorry.
I sent letters.
And he has sent you letters, correct?
Not many.
Has he sent letters?
A couple.
And when you look at this note, does that look like Bob Durst's writing?
No, the notes that I got from Mr. Durst, I believe, were in person. This is not.
Oh, so he didn't send you any writings where he printed?
I don't believe so.
Are you sure, or that's just your best memory?
My best memory.
Would you agree that Bob Durst is basically like family to you?
Yes.
Would you agree that you've never had another client who's as close to you as Bob Durst is?
I have family who I represent.
Okay.
Blood family.
So other than any blood family, would you agree that as a non-family member, you are closer to Mr. Durst than any other client you've represented in 49 years?
No, not really.
When you say no, not really, what's
I've
the
had
not?
other clients who I'm very close to.
How many clients, number-wise, have you had that you are as close to as you are to Mr. Durst? At least one. So what you're saying is in 49 years, other than family members, the client, you're close personally, two people, very close to, as one of them is Mr. Durst.
That's
Would you agree that Bob Durst is also extremely close personally to your wife?
yes.
Would you agree that Bob Durst is Godfather to your son? Was that a decision that you had input into?
Yes.
In making Bob Durst Godfather to your son, what did that mean to you?
And then, while my son was a lineman, and I died, he would be there to help him, to take care of him.
Is it fair to say, Mr. Altman, that in terms of a responsibility that you would give to any friend that you have, that would be the most sacred responsibility and honor you could bestow?
Yes.
And you designated Bob as the godfather of your son when?
When my son was born,
And when was that?
1976.
And as you sit here today, if you had a son born today, would Mr. Durst, would he still be the godfather of your son?
No.
Why?
For many reasons.
What's that? Why?
He's 74 years old. He's certainly not in a position to take care of a little boy.
Okay. But other than that, so the reason you would not name Mr. Durst godfather of your son today is because of his age.
And he's also in legal trouble right now.
So let's eliminate legal trouble and let's eliminate age. Your relation with Mr. Durst, you are still close enough to him that today, if he were younger and if he were not in legal trouble, he would still be the person you would name godfather of your son, correct?
If none of this had happened, if he was younger, just like it was in 1976, I guess I would. I mean, this is some hypothetical you're putting in front of me.
Well, the hypothetical I'm asking you is, I'm not asking you to, when you say none of this would have happened.
I mean, that he would be charged with murder.
Yes, I'm saying, as you sit here today, if Mr. Durst were not currently charged with murder and in legal jeopardy and 74 years old, isn't it correct that you would name him godfather to your son?
No.
When you named Mr. Durst godfather to your son, was that in any way related to your attorney-client relationship?
No.
Have you traveled with Bob?
Yes.
Have you traveled numerous places with him?
No.
Where have you traveled with Mr. Durst?
Besides the ball games here and there, things like that.
You know, I'm not talking about ball. I'm talking about where you actually traveled someplace.
We went to Puerto Rico.
And when was that?
I don't remember the year.
Well, would it have been before or after Mr. Durst's wife was?
I believe that was it.
Would it have been before or after Susan Berman was murdered?
I believe it was after.
Would it have been before or after Mr. Durst's litigation in Texas?
I believe it was after.
So, approximately, would you agree that would mean that you went on this trip subsequent to 2003? Does that sound right?
Subsequent, yes.
And if I were to ask you, so, do you think in 2017, estimate how many years ago it was that you went to Puerto Rico?
Oh, I can't. I don't know the years. I'm not good at it. Call me alive again.
So, Mr. Altman, is it fair to say then that, does it sound if you went sometime between 2003 and 2017? 2015, excuse me.
Yes.
Who else went with you?
That's my wife.
Was this pursuant to your relationship with Mr. Durst's lawyer?
Bob wanted to do something nice for us. I don't know what was in his head, but he certainly was nice to us.
So what I'm asking you was this trip, were you taking this trip to Mr. Durst's lawyer?
Was I taking a trip as his lawyer?
Yes.
I don't believe we did any business on the trip.
Was the trip, in your belief, who paid for it?
Bob?
Do you know what it cost?
No.
If I were to ask you, was your understanding this was a trip that Mr. Durst was giving you as his friend, or was he giving it to you as his lawyer?
I don't know what was working on his head. He wanted to do something nice for Emily and I.
Did you declare that trip as income, Mr. Altman?
No.
So then I guess you would agree, Mr. Altman, that if it were being done pursuant to your duties as Bob Durst's lawyer, you would have a legal and ethical obligation to report that trip as income, correct?
Yes.
So I'm going to assume then that you believe this trip was being taken as friends, correct?
Yes.
Okay. How long was the trip?
A few days.
How long?
A few days.
Can you do better than, what does a few days mean?
I can't do better.
Where was the trip?
Puerto Rico.
Where did you stay at Motel 6 down there? Tell us about the trip, please.
I'm not sure, but we stayed in a nice hotel.
Fair to say, Bob Durst, when he travels pretty well, right?
I don't know. I know he travels a lot. I don't know. Bob used to drive a smart car.
When you went on this trip, did you pay for anything?
I'm sure I did.
Is that when you say, I'm sure I did, that's not a yes.
Yes.
What did you pay for it?
I don't know. I didn't even remember what the trip was.
Maybe this will refresh your recollection. People's 21.
Yeah.
Do you recognize those people?
Yes, I do.
Does any of them look similar to Bob Durst?
Yes.
Does anybody look similar to Stewart Altman?
Mr. Lewin, that's a picture of me, Bob, and my wife.
I want to make sure, Mr. Altman, it might have been only possible, so I'm trying to ask my questions carefully. Does that refresh your recollection as to more of the details of that trip?
No.
Do you recall, if I were to ask you, did you say it 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star hotel?
Looks like it's right on the beach. It looks like a nice hotel.
You see those canopies to the right that are covered in the picture?
Yes.
No, on the other side. The ones that
Oh, I
are,
see.
those are like those luxury ones, right?
I don't know.
Yeah. You don't-
Are you familiar with this?
Aren't those the ones that you have to, like, privately rent?
I don't know, Miss Lewin. I didn't rent one.
You were to estimate, what do you think the value was of that trip that Bob paid for? Give me a guess.
I'm not going to give you a guess. I don't know. I told you I didn't know.
Are you able, do you have a basis to estimate?
I have no idea how much it costs.
Fair to say, Mr. Altman, thousands of dollars?
I don't have any idea how much it costs.
And that's because you didn't pay for any of it, correct?
Right.
Any other clients that you have, and I'm not asking for names, who've taken you on trips to luxury resorts?
No.
Has Bob Durst ever offered you money outside of your legal representation?
I don't understand the question.
Let me ask, it does seem a rather simple question, whether he's ever given you money.
No, the answer is no. He hasn't given me money, Judge.
There you go.
Is there a reason, Mr. Altman, why, when I first asked the question, you just didn't answer it?
Because I wasn't sure what you meant. That's why.
Has Mr. Durst, or any representative of Mr. Durst, ever given you any other gifts, either you or your wife?
My wife has a car. Got a car.
She got a car from who?
Mr. Durst, I believe, paid gift tax on it for us.
And when did he give you this gift?
2002 or 3. 2002 or 3.
Isn't it correct, he gave you this gift while he was in custody in Pennsylvania, correct?
I don't remember the date of the gift, but it was around 2002 or 3.
And it's fair that is it your memory that when he gave you the gift, that he was in jail and that it was done through his wife, Deborah Cherry?
Yes.
Was this an old used car?
No,
What kind of car was it?
Lexus.
What kind of Lexus?
4-door.
Do you know what brand of Lexus, what model Lexus it was?
I think it was ES 300.
Do you remember, was that, at that time, that was between $40,000 and $50,000 car, wasn't it?
I'm not sure, but I would think about 40.
Was that gift to you, was that pursuant to your attorney-client relationship? Was that given you as a friend?
I think it was a little both.
So did you declare then as income?
Mr. Durst paid gift tax on that.
Well, gift tax would be a gift. The part of it that would be pursuant to your representation,
I answered the question.
did you pay income tax on that car?
No.
So, Mr. Altman, again, so your view of this, well, you said it was a gift to your wife, correct?
Yes.
So it wasn't a gift for you, is that right?
I think it was for both of us.
How was he ended up getting a car from him? Yeah.
Yes?
I have to be back in New York next week for the law practice. I'd like to move this along.
Yeah, we will move it along. So, but there's a question pending. It may be an uncomfortable question, but you will kindly answer it and we'll move along.
Could you please repeat the question?
How was it that Mr. Durst ended up giving you a $40,000 or $50,000 Lexus to you and your wife?
He wanted to do something nice for us.
And how do you know that?
He said so.
And again, your understanding that he was doing that because you and your wife have been his friends for 40-some odd years.
And for all the help we've been giving him and the faith we have in him, yes.
Help and faith as supportive friends, correct?
Also, with legal work too, I stayed.
The legal work you did for Mr. Durst, you charged and got paid for, correct?
Yes.
So, Mr. Altman, you did not view this car as anything related to your legal work, correct?
I thought it was a bonus.
A bonus, okay. Have you or your wife ever taken Bob on a vacation?
No.
You ever bought him a car?
No.
You ever bought him any sizable gift at all?
No.
Any other clients bought you cars, Mr. Altman?
No. No.
Is Bob Durst an intelligent man? Your experience?
Yes.
If someone were to say, you know what, Bob's, quote, not really smart, would you agree with that?
No.
If someone were to say, you know, Bob Durst is, quote, not clever, would you agree with that?
No.
In your experience, is Bob Durst someone who experiences can feel emotion?
I'm not qualified to answer that.
This man's been your friend for more than 50 years, and you're telling me you can't answer from your experience, Bob Durst appears to be somebody who can feel emotion. Take testimony?
My testimony is that I believe he has some kind of problem with expressing emotion.
You ever seen Bob Durst laugh?
Yes.
You ever seen Bob Durst express joy or happiness?
Yes.
If someone were to say, Bob Durst doesn't know what happy is, would you agree with that statement?
I'm not sure.
When you say you're not sure, why?
Because he has problems with his emotions as a result.
In your experience, is Bob Durst able to relate to people when he wants to?
He has problems relating.
It's time for our recess. We'll now resume at 3:25. All right, this is Robert Durst. Mr. Durst is present with his lawyers. People represented. Mr. Altman is resuming the witness stand. He has counsel as well. You remain under oath. You may continue with your examination.
Does Bob Durst have a good sense of humor?
Yes.
Fair to say that he has a biting wit.
Yes.
Would you agree he could be one of the funniest people you've ever met?
At times.
Would you also agree that he knows how to deliver a line?
Yes.
In your experience, has Bob been able to establish close relationships with other people?
He has difficulty.
He has a close relationship with you, correct?
Yes.
Close relationship with Emily?
Yes.
He had a close relationship with Susan Berman,
Yes.
Nick Chabin,
I think so.
Doug Oliver.
I think so.
With respect to your observations, did you have a chance to observe Bob in any other romantic relationships other than Kathy?
No.
In your experience as Bob's friend, do you consider him to be an honest person?
Yes.
Have you known Bob to lie when it's to his advantage?
Yes.
So when you said that you consider him to be honest, but you're saying you have known him to lie when it's to his advantage, would you agree that those two statements are somewhat in conflict?
No, I've also known to lie when he didn't have any advantage.
So you just said a moment ago that you believe Bob Durst is an honest person. Then when I said, have you known him to lie when it's to his advantage, you said yes. So I'm just trying to reconcile those two statements.
I can't reconcile for you.
Well, if I were then to ask, and I ask you again, the first question, in light of the fact that you said that you've known Bob to lie when it's to his advantage, would you agree that he is not an honest person?
No. I know some honest people can lie. That's the way I feel.
Do you agree, is Bob a private person?
Yes.
And in fact, if I were to ask you about the various friends you've had, and I were to kind of have you rank them, you would agree that Bob is one of the more private people that you've ever met.
Yes.
Would it surprise you if Bob were to give somebody who was not an incredibly close friend a key to his residence to have when he wasn't there?
I think you're referring to the Marsh Black Key. Is that it?
Sir, did you answer the question that I asked?
Do I think that Robert, is this the question, that Robert Durst would give somebody a key?
Based on the Bob Durst that you know, would you expect that he would give a key to his residence to someone that he was not extremely close to?
Yes, he gave me a key.
Mr. Altman, I'm not asking you about Morris Black. I'm asking you, Bob Durst, who you've known for 49 years, strike that, who you've known for more than 50 years, who you know, you've said is one of the most private people that you know, I'm asking you, would you expect that Bob Durst would give a key to his residence to somebody that he wasn't extremely close to? That is a yes or no answer.
No.
Outside of any attorney-client communication you had with Mr. Durst, did he ever tell you that he was physically violent with Kathy?
No.
Would it surprise you, Mr. Altman, if Bob Durst had been physically violent with his wife Kathy?
Yes, it would surprise me.
Mr. Altman, you've watched the Jinx, correct?
Yes.
Did you watch the Jinx?
Yes.
Did you see on the Jinx where Mr. Durst admitted repeatedly that he was physically violent with Kathy?
Yes.
So, is that the first time that you became aware that Mr. Durst had been violent with Kathy?
Yes.
Did that question your cause whether or not you actually knew this man?
No.
If I were to have asked you in advance of watching the Jinx, if Bob was physically violent with Kathy, would your answer have been, no way, there's no way he's physically violent with Kathy?
Correct.
So, the fact then that he's admitting he was physically violent with her, you're telling me that does not affect anything about your opinion as to whether you know this man or not?
It surprised me, yes.
Did it surprise you in a manner where you questioned whether or not you truly knew Mr. Durst?
I guess in a way.
And so when you say in a way, please explain.
I know Mr. Durst very well, but I was surprised that he was physically violent with Kathy.
You're aware from the Jinx and from other non-privileged and public sources that Mr. Durst has admitted to dismembering Morris Black, is that correct?
Yes.
Did that surprise you?
Yes.
If I would have said to you beforehand, without Bob Durst admitting it, Bob Durst dismembered Morris Black with an axe and saws, would your response have been, no way, impossible?
I really don't understand the question.
You don't understand
I
that?
don't understand. Do you mean before the Morris Black was discovered dead and before the...
Were you surprised when you heard, before Bob Durst admitted to it, that he was accused of dismembering Morris Black?
Yes.
And is it fair to say that, again, at the time that the allegation was first made, your response was, there's no way Bob Durst would have done that, correct?
My response to when I heard that he admitted it?
No. Your response when he was accused of dismembering Morris Black, your first response,
Yes.
there's no way you would have done that, correct?
I didn't think he would have.
So, I have a question. Does that make you doubt? Now we have physical violence with Kathy Durst, we have him dismembering Morris Black's corpse. Two things that you are aware that Bob Durst is admitted to doing, correct?
Correct.
Does that cause you to question, how well do I know this man?
I felt that Bob Durst must have been panicked and scared to death to do such a thing. I didn't think he would ever be able to do that. I was shocked, yes.
Wait, to dismember Morris Black or physically
Dismember
abuse his wife?
Dismember Morris Black.
So I'm asking you, you had those two things now in mind, both those things. Not just the dismemberment, and you have his admission that he was physically violent with his wife. I'm asking you, does that cause you to question whether or not you really know this man?
Well, I guess I didn't know him 100%. I do question that, yes.
You say you didn't know 100%. It's fair to say that those two acts are so shocking and abhorrent that it makes you question what other things Mr. Durst is capable of. Is that fair?
The domestic violence is a very common thing. That's not so shocking and abhorrent. I see it every day in my practice. Every day. Dismembering the body is shocking and abhorrent. Yes.
Do you see domestic violence among your close friends, Mr. Altman?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Well, what I'm telling you is you're saying you see it in your practice every day. You're saying Bob Durst is one of your best friends, so I'm simply asking you, this man, who you've known for 50 plus years, you discover that he was physically violent with his wife, you discover he dismembered a corpse, and I'm asking you, doesn't that cause you to question what else Bob Durst could have done that you might not have expected? Is that fair?
Sure.
You agree that's a fair statement, right? Is that correct? Sorry? Do you remember the last time you saw Kathy before she disappeared?
No.
Do you remember the last time you talked to Bob before she disappeared?
No.
Sir?
No.
Oh, I didn't hear your answer. How did you find out that Kathy was missing?
Not going.
And do you remember when that was?
After she disappeared.
Do you remember how long after she disappeared?
I think it was a few days. I think it was like the end of January.
And when he called you, would you agree that he was calling you as his friend?
He called me to ask me if I had seen Kathy because he was worried about her.
And again, my question is, do you agree that he was asking you that as a friend of you and Kathy's, correct?
He wasn't at that time, yes.
Okay. What did you tell him in response?
I hadn't heard from her. I didn't know what she was.
Do you know if your wife was either on the phone or present when this conversation with Mr. Durst occurred?
My wife was around. I don't know if she was on the phone or not.
Knowing your relationship, would you have told your wife about this conversation at the time?
My relationship with my wife?
Yes.
Of course, yes.
Is it fair to say that this was a significant event with one of your closest friends' wife disappearing?
Yes.
Would you agree that despite being a lawyer for all these years, you've never had anybody else in your life disappear off the face of the earth like Kathy? Is that correct?
No.
That's not correct?
No.
How many other times have you had people you're close to disappear off the face of the earth?
Kids in the family run away, things like that.
Your kids?
Not my kids, no. Relatives.
Okay, so is it fair to say that in terms of your friends, that you've never had another close friend's wife disappear, never be heard from again, correct?
Correct.
So is it fair to say that this was a significant event for you personally because of the close relationship you have with Bob and Kathy?
Yes.
Did you consider Kathy a close friend as well?
Yes.
You would agree your loyalty was to Bob over Kathy, is that right?
Right.
And you said that you knew Susan, but you don't really consider her a friend, is that correct?
Correct.
If I were to ask you, is your loyalty towards Bob or to Susan, who would it be? So, Bob calls you on the phone, he tells you, he asks if you've seen his wife, you tell him you haven't seen her. I assume you asked him for the details of when's the last time you saw her, what happened, correct?
He told me, yes.
What did he tell you?
He told me that he hadn't seen her since he took her to the train station and we could tell her no. And she returned to the city. She was supposed to go to medical school the next day. And he found out that she hadn't gone to school and she's been missing since then. I think it was, he called me, I think it was like the first day. So she had been missing for 3 days already when he called me.
At the time that he called you, do you know if he told you that he had already reported her missing to the police?
I can't recall.
Do you remember, did you ask him for specific details about, okay, what time did you drop her off, where was she, anything like that?
He told me that night, that Sunday night, to go to the train. You could tell me, dropped her off, she was supposed to take the train into the city, and return to the apartment.
And the apartment was referring to, you tell you, to the Riverside Drive apartment that he had in New York City.
Yes, sir.
And did he tell you during this conversation that he had spoken to her that night at the apartment?
I really don't remember.
Are you aware from watching Jinx and from things you read that Mr. Durst originally told police that he had spoken to Kathy Durst that night, late that night, he called her from a payphone, and that she was in their Riverside Drive apartment? Are you aware of that information?
Yes.
Are you also aware that Mr. Durst has now said that that's a lie?
Yes.
Do you remember if Mr. Durst told you that lie when he spoke to you?
He told me the same thing he told the police.
Meaning,
Yes.
so originally he lied to you.
Yes.
Is there a reason a moment ago when I asked you, what did he say? And you started off with, I don't remember.
I started off thinking it might be attorney-client, but I didn't want to answer the
No,
question.
I'm not talking about when you went to talk to Mr. McClain. A couple of questions ago, I asked you, did Bob Durst tell you whether he had talked to Kathy that night? And you first responded that you did not remember, I don't know. Then I brought up the fact that he's already admitted that he lied. And then you now said, yes, he told me the same thing he told police. And you admitted, yes, he lied to me. My question is it your testimony, Mr. Altman, that you did not remember that Bob Durst had lied to you about this until I brought it up?
No, I didn't remember whether or not he told me he talked to her that night. I know he told me she went back to the city. I really didn't remember whether he told me he talked to her that night. Later on, he said he had talked to her, to the police, but later on he said he didn't.
When did you find out that Bob Durst had lied about it?
When I saw the Jinx,
When Bob told you that his wife was missing, did you offer to try to help find her?
no,
Can you tell me why?
I don't do those things.
You don't do those things?
I don't find people.
So one of your closest friends' wives has turned up missing, and your response is you didn't offer to assist with trying to find her.
Right?
Can you tell us why?
I don't do those things. I don't find people.
If your son was missing, would you try to find him?
Oh, yeah, I call the police in the hospitals.
Okay. Did you offer to do anything to try to find Kathy?
No,
Why?
I didn't want to.
Why was that?
I didn't think it would help. If there was something I thought that he needed that I could help with, I would have.
And when you said you didn't think it would help, because you knew she was dead, correct?
No. Oh, that's something.
Okay. Tell me when you said it wouldn't help. How did you know that it wouldn't help to try to find her?
I wouldn't be of any help. I wouldn't know what hospitals to call. I wouldn't know what police to call. If you wanted to call the police, you could call the police.
Mr. Altman, your best friend's wife turns up missing. You're a lawyer who has connections and experience in criminal matters, even at that point in time. And you're telling me you didn't say to Bob, listen, Bob, what can I do to help? What can we do to try to find Kathy?
Right?
Was Bob, did he sound concerned?
No.
Did that seem strange to you?
Yes.
When he told you she was missing and he didn't sound concerned, did you ask any further questions of him?
No.
When he was saying this to you, Mr. Altman, were you concerned during that conversation on your own? Oh my God, I think Bob might killed her.
Never.
No, but wait, never.
That never occurred to me.
When is the next time you had a conversation with Bob Durst about the disappearance of his wife?
I don't remember.
Did you and Emily, after the call, did you discuss, oh my God, what can we do to help? What's going on?
I think my wife called some hospitals.
Did your wife explain to you, by the way, are you aware of your wife's testimony regarding this area?
I think she's close in hospitals. I think that's what she told you.
So, okay,
So
so,
she?
yes, that is what you told me. You're well aware of her conditional examination testimony, aren't you?
No, all of it. No, I just talked to her about something.
So, do you know how it was that your wife decided which hospital she was going to call?
No idea.
Did you ever discuss it with her?
No.
When Kathy disappeared, did you think she was going to come back?
Yes.
When she didn't come back, was there a point in time where you said to yourself, you know what? Gosh, I wonder what happened to her.
Yes.
When was that? How long did it take?
I really can't pinpoint how long, but it was a while.
You know, while being
Weeks.
weeks, but weeks, period, not years.
Not.
Okay, so weeks, so you end up, by the way, when that happens, do you call up Bob and you say, Bob, what's going on with Kathy?
I don't remember speaking to Bob after that.
So one of your closest friends' wives is missing. You have one conversation where you say, you don't help find people.
I didn't say
No,
that to Bob.
no, but you're saying, the result of that is you don't help find people, and then you never ask him any more questions about what happened with his wife.
Right.
Does that seem strange to you?
Yes.
Can you tell me why you didn't ask me any more questions?
Because Bob didn't want to talk to me about it. If he did, he would have called me.
So, Stewart, Mr. Altman, would you agree that the fact that your friend's wife is missing and that he never brings up to you again the fact that she's missing, did that cause you at that point in time to say to yourself, oh my gosh, could he be responsible for her disappearance?
No, I was really going along the lines of my head that she probably ran away.
You were aware that Kathy was in her last year of medical school, correct?
Yes.
Did it seem strange to you that a woman who was a couple of months from graduation in medical school, about to start her internship, would, quote, run away and never see her again?
Very strange.
I'm sorry?
Very strange.
Okay, so you said, though, that's what you thought, right?
Right?
So at a certain point in time, did you say to yourself, you know, no one's heard from her, I don't think she ran away?
Until today? Mm-hmm.
Well, no, I'm talking about back in 1982. I would assume it didn't take you months or years to say.
It took me a long time to think that she wasn't coming back.
When was it that you started to think she wasn't coming back?
Maybe a year.
I'm sorry?
Maybe a year.
And what was it at that point in time that made you think she wasn't coming back?
The passage of time.
And at any point during that year, did you come to Bob and say, hey, Bob, gosh, what happened to Kathy?
He never changed his story to me.
Well, let's back up. I thought your testimony was you never asked him about it again. Now you're saying he never changed his story. Which is it? Both.
I spoke with Bob during the year,
Okay.
and he never said anything different.
Did you, during that year, did you discuss his wife's disappearance with him?
No more than what he told me originally.
So he told you the same thing, that basically Kathy was supposed to go to medical school. She went back to New York City. Did he, by that point in time, was he still going with the story that you had talked to her that night as he told the police?
Yes.
So he was still, you know today, lying to you about his contact with Kathy, correct?
Yes.
Did you say to him during that year something to the effect of, Bob, this doesn't make sense. Where could Kathy be?
I did ask him if he had any idea where Kathy could be. He said he had no idea.
Did you pursue it farther than that?
No.
And was your reason, as you stated before, that if Bob didn't want to talk about it, you weren't going to ask him?
I did ask him. I did ask him. He didn't want to go any further.
And that's what I'm saying. So is your reason that once Bob gave you a very simple answer, you did not ask any further? Is that correct?
We talked about it one time.
Okay. So I understand what you're saying. The extent of what you talked about was simply Bob saying the same story that he gave, which was in essence to put her on the train. She went to New York City. She talked to her that night. He doesn't know what happened. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I just asked you, during that year, did you ever ask him for more details about it?
No.
And would you agree, Mr. Altman, that you did not ask for more details because you sensed that Bob Durst didn't want to give you any more details?
No, I didn't think he knew. I really didn't think he knew.
Well, Mr. Altman, was the reason that you didn't ask him because you didn't think he knew anything, or because he didn't appear to want to tell you?
I really don't think he knew.
But you didn't directly ask him, correct?
I did ask him if he knew, and he said no. He had no idea where she was.
Okay.
That's where we left it.
But so at that point, Mr. Altman, she's now been gone a year. Are you saying you didn't further explore with him and say, well, Bob, where could she be? What do you think happened to her? You just let it go at that point, is that correct?
Yes.
And isn't it true that you let it go because Bob Durst was your close friend and he didn't want to talk about it anymore?
He didn't want to talk about it.
And so is that correct, yes or no?
Yes.
And is it fair to say that when Kathy disappeared, your allegiance was to Bob Durst and not to Kathy Durst?
Yes.
And as you sit here today, your friendship and your allegiance, and I'm not talking about any attorney-client relationship, your personal allegiance and friendship is to Bob Durst and not Kathy Durst, correct?
Yes.
Did Bob tell you, when you had the conversations with him about the last night that he had been with her, did he tell you that they had fought prior to her getting on the train?
No.
And if he didn't tell you that they fought, I assume he did not tell you that there was pushing and shoving between the two of them, correct?
Correct.
You watched the Jinx, and on the Jinx, Bob Durst said that they had a pushing and shoving fight that night. Do you recall that?
Yes.
I assume that it surprised you when you heard that.
Yes.
Did Bob Durst, since that conversation, those conversations in that year, have you ever had another conversation with him outside of your attorney-client relationship about Kathy's disappearance?
No.
When did you become aware that Bob was a suspect in Kathy's disappearance?
Well, after her disappearance, I believe the case was closed, so it was gone until Janine Pirot came around and reopened the investigation. That's when he was the suspect.
Oh, Mr. Phelps, I want to go back to, so originally, in 1982, when Kathy disappeared, were you aware that Bob Durst was a suspect in her disappearance?
No, I'm not sure. I thought he was.
At that point in time, the information you were getting was through the papers and the press, is that correct?
Yes.
During this period of time, in 1982 to 1983, is it fair to say that the information you were getting about the case was from the press.
Yes.
Is it also fair to say that at that point in time, you were not getting information from Bob Durst about the disappearance?
Correct.
Other than what you've previously discussed, is that correct?
Right.
Now, and that means, Mr. Officer, to be clear, it's not that Bob Durst was giving you information, but that information is subject to attorney-client privilege. You're saying, listen, I wasn't getting any information from Bob Durst other than what I said. Attorney-client, nothing. Correct?
Correct. I did have conversations with Bob. I got my times mixed up. I did have conversations with Bob subsequently. I realize now that he had hired an attorney from the beginning named Nicholas Opella to represent him after Kathleen disappeared. And Bob did speak with me about Nicholas Opella and asked my advice on some things, on how to handle things. And I did talk to him about attorney-client privilege matters. Wasn't trying to hide that.
Right, and so that's, you're not talking about any conversations you had, merely the fact that you gave some advice to him and that you, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So then the answer, you didn't have a conversation about, in essence, what happened to Kathy. You had conversations about legal representation, etc.
Yes.
Do you know who Douglas Durst is?
Yes.
Do you know Douglas personally, or just through what Bob has told you about him?
Personally.
How well do you know Douglas Durst personally?
Douglas went to St. High School as I did, and Douglas worked with Bob for many years.
Are you aware, based on, again, non-privileged communications, are you aware of what the relationship with Douglas Durst and Bob Durst is and has been?
Yes.
Fair to say it's a very acrimonious relationship.
Fair to say.
Well, I want to ask you, as far as you know, would you agree that Bob absolutely hates his brother Douglas?
Let's give it acrimonious.
Were you in contact with Bob when Douglas was named head of the organization?
Yes.
And do you recall, was that in the early to mid-90s?
Yes.
And how did Bob respond to that?
He was upset.
Do you agree that it had a devastating effect on Bob Durst when Douglas Durst was named head of the Durst organization?
Yes.
And in fact, you told Dateline, quote, he was groomed for it. That was supposed to be his job. He was upset. It had a devastating effect on Bob, correct?
Correct.
Did you ever lose contact with Bob during the period after Douglas was named head of the Durst organization?
Yes.
Do you know when approximately that was that you lost contact?
Bob Seymour died. After Seymour's death, approximately months within that, I hadn't heard from Bob from then until he was arrested in Pennsylvania in November 2001.
Do you know where Bob was living during that time period?
No.
So, do you know if Bob Durst came back for his father's funeral?
I don't know.
You've since watched the Jinx, and you are aware that Bob Durst ended up moving to Arcata, California, correct?
I thought it was Trinidad.
You know what? You're right. It's Arcata Airport. It is Trinidad. Thank you, Mr. Hall. You're aware of that from the Jinx, correct?
Yes.
When did you find out that New York authorities were reinvestigating Bob's disappearance? I'm sorry, Kat's disappearance.
It's either when I got a phone call from a state trooper named Joe Carroll, or when Janine Pirro announced it.
And so your testimony is you had no contact with Bob between the time Seymour Durst died And when Bob was arrested in Pennsylvania, is that correct?
Not that I can remember.
Did you have an attorney-client relationship with Bob Durst between 1995 and 2000, November 2001?
I hadn't had any communications from him, but I do consider myself his attorney.
Okay,
And I think I'm still bound by my obligations to Bob.
so my question to you is, between 1995 and 2001, what attorney-client representation did you have involving Bob Durst?
I had no communications with him during that period.
No, that's not what I'm asking.
I didn't have any.
What attorney-client relationship did you have between Bob Durst in 1995 to 2001 between you and Bob Durst?
Obligations continue.
I still had obligations to Bob. I remained his attorney, although I had no communication with him.
Or did you have a formal retention agreement with Mr. Durst?
No.
Have you ever had any formal retention agreement with Mr. Durst?
No.
When did you begin billing Mr. Durst for your attorney-client services?
I built the Durst organization when he was working there. I used to do monthly billings.
For real estate, is that correct?
A lot of things.
How did you find out about the reinvestigation?
I'm not sure. He was either Joe Picaro or Janine.
You agreed you could not have found out about it from Mr. Durst because you didn't have any contact with him between 1995 and 2001, correct?
I really, I don't want to go on record and make a misstatement. I said I really don't remember.
Well, is it your testimony that you did not find out about the reinvestigation of Kathy Durst's disappearance from Robert Durst? Is that your testimony?
No, I might have. I don't remember.
Have you spoken to Dateline about Bob Durst's response to the reinvestigation into Kathy Durst? Did you speak to Dateline about that?
His response to the reopening up of the investigation?
Yeah. Did you speak to Dateline about that? You did? Yes? And you would agree that you would never relate to Dateline privileged communication without Mr. Durst's permission, correct?
I never had the use with
So then,
I never had authority to make statements about the
Is it a good time to take a break?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break until 3:15. Do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case.
3:15.